This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
Welcome to the Fatigue Fixer podcast. Ever wonder why it feels like the entire sisterhood is just so darn exhausted? We're diving deep into everything from those sneaky physical culprits, think iron levels, playing hide and seek, or a moody thyroid, to the mental weights of always being on and that sneaky urge to please everyone. And let's not forget society's oh-so-high bar that we're tirelessly trying to reach. I'm Dr. Sarah Vedbonkar, your guide on this energy-finding mission. As a naturopathic doctor with over a decade of experience, I've been piecing together the fatigue puzzle, asking why so many incredible women around me, including my patients, often feel like they're running on empty. So pull up a chair or perhaps pop in your headphones and head out for a walk. Together we'll uncover those hidden, surprising, and sometimes even downright unexpected reasons behind that lingering tiredness. Ready to recharge those batteries? All right, deep breath. Let's jump into today's insightful episode. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah, and today, brace yourselves because we're diving into a topic that's shaking the very foundation of the wellness world. Yes, you guessed it, the horrors of oatmeal. Once hailed as the breakfast of champions, oatmeal has now been exposed for what it truly is, a toxic predator in your pantry, lurking behind its facade of fiber and wholesomeness. Forget about the cholesterol in your eggs. Oatmeal is the new villain that's trying to kill us. So pour yourself a cup of kale smoothie and let's get ready to unravel the sinister truth behind this so-called superfood. I hope by now you've picked up on my sarcasm, but the hate on for oatmeal right now is no joke. If you feel like it's impossible to keep up with the latest nutrition trends, welcome. This is my job, and I'm constantly getting whiplash from the ever-changing trends and diet recommendations I see online from so-called health and wellness experts. And this latest hate on for oatmeal is the perfect example of how lost we are when it comes to feeding ourselves, and how exhausting it is to try to figure out what a healthy diet looks like. This is the one where oatmeal is trying to kill you, and today we're going to unpack why the current attack on oatmeal is so harmful, and why our attempts to follow all these food rules is leaving us tired and miserable, more prone to cravings and overeating, and heavier than ever before. If you've listened to episode 1, the one where your pants don't fit, you know how I feel about diet culture. And it's tricky because dieting isn't as popular now, so many diets are now parading themselves around under the banner of wellness or a lifestyle. But don't be fooled, these are still diets in sheep's clothing. I often think about our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers because they didn't need to be told to drink 8 glasses of water a day. They probably would have scoffed at such a silly rule because they probably just drank when they were thirsty. But nowadays, most women are really disconnected from our own bodies. We're always super busy trying to do 3 things at the same time, so that we don't have the time, attention, or inclination to notice whether we're thirsty. So we made a rule that we're supposed to follow. Drink 2 liters of water each day. And what food rules have ultimately done is further disconnect us from our bodies. Instead of getting clear signals from our bodies about what to eat, how much, and when, we've outsourced so much of our food decision-making externally. And when I really stop and think about it, it just seems so crazy to me that we would think that some stranger on the internet, even if they're super smart and knowledgeable about health and nutrition, that they could possibly know more about what your nutrition needs are than you do. No one knows how to feed yourself better than you do. But this is just another area where we have convinced women that they can't trust themselves when it comes to their hunger. That if we let our bodies run the show, we would subsist on ice cream and chocolate and burgers. This distrust of our appetites, our bodies, and our ability to nourish ourselves makes us the perfect prey for diet culture. Since we aren't to be trusted, we should trust the so-called experts. Even if they've never met us, know nothing about us, our health, our schedule, our cultural heritage, our food preferences, our allergies, nope. They don't know anything about us, but they must know better than us because they are experts. Never mind that feeding yourself is a deeply innate drive. Humans are still humaning on this earth because we have a deeply sophisticated system of cues that tells us when and how much to eat. We've just royally screwed it up with dieting and a food landscape where processed foods are available 24/7. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You want to lose weight or get healthy, so you start a new plan. It's most likely based on a list of foods that you're to avoid or restrict. You're feeling super hopeful and motivated, so you follow it for a couple of weeks. But now you're PMSing. And all you can think about is ice cream or bread or cheese. So you try having grapes instead to curb that craving, but obviously that doesn't cut it because grapes are not ice cream. Eventually, your motivation and willpower runs out, and you find yourself face first in a pint of Haagen-Dazs. Welcome to the diet pendulum. The more we restrict, the more we end up overeating. And what's sad is that we have been taught that the solution to our cravings and overeating is control and restriction, when in fact, our attempts to control and restrict our food are what directly cause cravings, binging, and overeating. Your brain doesn't know that you have a full fridge of food. It just knows that all of a sudden you're eating less. So it assumes, based on millennia of experience, that if you're eating less, it must be because there's less food available. So your brain freaks out because it needs food for survival. So what happens? It drives up hunger because it wants you to find food. Again, it doesn't know that there is food literally everywhere in sight. What's happened when you have restricted your food is that you've triggered something called primal hunger, which is literally this animalistic drive to seek food and eat in order to survive. I've actually started to see this in real life. I've noticed how some women eat like they haven't eaten for days. They often have a history of restricted eating or even a disordered eating in the past. And it's like when a plate is put in front of them, they cannot eat quickly enough. The further you move in the direction of strict diet rules, the further you can expect to swing into eating everything in sight when your ability to abstain and restrict ends, as it inevitably does every single time we attempt a restrictive diet. This was made painfully obvious to me in university when I did my first named diet, the South Beach diet. It was a low-carb, relatively low-fat diet that I must have followed for a couple of weeks in an attempt to lose that dreaded freshman 15. Do you want to know how it ended? With me eating cookies out of a garbage can. Yeah. I felt so deprived being on that diet that my brain went bananas, and I picked chocolate chip cookies out of a garbage can and ate them. And if you're wondering why there were chocolate chip cookies in the garbage, my roommate at the time had baked cookies and thrown them out so that she didn't eat them all herself because she didn't trust herself to be near freshly baked cookies. If all of this doesn't scream why diet culture is a nightmare, I don't know what does. Now, I hope for you that you have never eaten food out of the garbage, but you've probably demolished a tub of ice cream and ate so many chips that you felt sick afterwards. That's what restriction does. It leads to losing control. And instead of deciding to let go of all the rules, we usually just try some new form of rules and restriction. And that is the never-ending pendulum of dieting. Swinging back and forth between dieting or clean eating and then fuck it, I only live once, I'll eat what I please. Not only is this exhausting physically, constantly having to think and plan about what you can and cannot eat, but the emotional and mental energy it takes to follow a restrictive diet is enormous. And we all know this because what happens the second you decide, I'm not eating bread today? Your brain just starts thinking about bread. So now, on top of all of the normal tasks that your brain has to do in a day, it's trying not to think about bread while really just thinking about bread. And you have to use your precious energy to not eat the bread. We don't realize how much energy many of us spend thinking about what we're going to eat, what we're not supposed to eat, when we'll eat, what we'll make for our next meal. If you want to know how much space food thoughts take up, ask yourself how would you feel if all your food thoughts were all of a sudden replaced by thoughts of sharks? How much time would you spend thinking about sharks? Would that be a concern to you? If you spent a couple of hours every single day thinking about sharks, would you maybe start to worry that maybe you were a little bit obsessed with sharks or maybe had an unhealthy relationship with sharks? Now, don't get me wrong, healthy eating is very important, obviously more than sharks, but that doesn't mean we have to spend a lot of time or brain power thinking about and planning what we can and cannot eat. Again, our bodies were beautifully designed to do this for us. We've just completely lost the connection to these signals, and we've lost the trust that we know what is healthy for us. Which brings us back to oatmeal. The fact that we are starting to question whether whole grains, as well as fruits and vegetables, are good for us tells me how disconnected we are from our knowing. Again, your grandmother would probably laugh in your face if you told her you weren't eating oatmeal because it's toxic. So let's talk about the claims against oatmeal. Oatmeal has made the cardinal mistake of containing phytic acid. Phytic acid is a compound found in many plant-based foods. And the supposed problem with eating oatmeal is that the phytic acid will block the absorptions of minerals. Except that we have a whole bunch of science that tells us the exact opposite. We know that foods high in phytic acid don't actually impair your mineral status, including things like zinc and iron. You would have to eat an enormous amount of phytic acid and have a very low nutrient diet for this to actually cause a problem. What we know is that people who eat oatmeals specifically have positive health outcomes, including better glycemic control for people with diabetes, better cholesterol profile, lower blood pressure in people with high blood pressure, less type 2 diabetes, and all-cause mortality, meaning you're less likely to die from all causes if you're eating oatmeal, and lower rates of cancer. Okay, well, what about the impact on the blood sugar, maybe you're thinking? We know that oatmeal carries a low to moderate glycemic load. And again, food is supposed to raise your blood sugar. It is perfectly normal for your blood sugar to go up after you eat, especially if you're eating carbs like oatmeal. That is not a problem, and it's not a design flaw, and it's not something we should be avoiding. It's a system to get energy and glucose to your brain and your body. This obsession we have right now with blood sugar is making people cut out perfectly healthy foods from their diet. And again, having your blood sugar go up after you eat is perfectly normal. What we want to avoid is prolonged elevations in blood sugar. We don't want it going too high for too long. And again, a bowl of oatmeal is very unlikely to be doing that, especially if you add some protein and some fat with it. It's probably not going to cause any issues. So again, when we look at the actual human outcomes, not the cherry-picked studies that these experts are using to freak everybody out about oatmeal, we know that people who eat oatmeal have better outcomes, even if it's not organic. There is so much data supporting that people who eat more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables have better health outcomes. It almost doesn't matter what outcome we're looking at, whether it's cancer, heart disease, diabetes. We do better when we eat more plant-based foods. And the problem right now is that we have become hyper-focused on these small random ingredients in foods like phytic acid, and we have completely lost sight of the big picture. The fact that we're blaming oatmeal as the reason we're unhealthy should be a giant red flag. It should tell you how far we have lost our way when it comes to healthy eating. All of the noise and all of the advice has just further confused us about what is healthy, because if you ignored all of that advice and I brought you to the grocery store, I know you would be able to pick out healthy foods. It's really not that complicated. Nutrition isn't that complicated. And when we look at the cultures in the world that live the longest, healthiest lives, they are eating mostly plant-based, lots of whole grains, lots of fruits and vegetables. They are not avoiding oatmeal because of the phytic acid. They're not avoiding tomatoes because it's a nightshade. They're not avoiding chickpeas because it has lectins. They are eating just a normal diet that contains whole foods. And so when we look at our nutrition, we would benefit so much more from zooming out and looking at the big picture and not worrying so much about the phytic acid in our oatmeal or the carrageenan in our almond milk. These are not the things that are going to have big influence on your health and your well-being. There's no single food that's making you unhealthy, just like there's no single food that can make you healthy. We need to look at the big picture. So what are some of the questions that we can ask ourselves to see how we're doing when it comes to our nutrition? Number one, am I eating enough? Again, I would argue that you don't need a meal plan or a calculator or a nutritionist to tell you how much to eat. You have a very well-calibrated system in your body that is designed to do just that. When we actually tune into our bodies, we start ignoring all of the noise, we will start to feel our hunger and fullness signals again. And these are your best guides when it comes to figuring out how much food you need to eat. So what if we, instead of looking at the internet or Instagram for the latest health fad, what if we actually tuned inwards and let our own bodies, which are unique to us, what if we let them guide us? And I know this probably feels very scary, especially if you have come from years of dieting, because you probably don't trust your hunger. And I get that. I used to not trust my hunger because when I was dieting, my hunger led me to eating cookies out of a garbage can. It led me to overeat regularly. It led me to sneak food when no one was around. And all of that was happening as a result of my restriction. Since I have removed all food rules from my diet, I don't have that anymore. My brain is not freaking out because it knows that it's going to get fed at least 3 times a day and that I'm going to eat enough so that I feel full and satisfied. So if you are not currently tuned into your hunger and fullness cues, I would start there. And in the beginning, they might not work very well, especially if you have a lot of dieting in your past. Certainly, if you've done any disordered eating, working with a professional who specializes in helping you around food relationships would be very helpful. But learning to reconnect to our food, like our hunger and fullness signals, is such a powerful thing to do, because what you're actually doing is you're taking back your power and you're deciding that you trust your body to tell you when to eat. Because I promise you that your body knows you better than any random influencer on the internet, myself included. No one knows your body like you do. And it doesn't mean that we can't seek out advice when we need it, but when we completely outsource our nutrition to outsiders, we're never going to get that deep, meaningful relationship with our body and food that we could have if we actually just trusted ourselves. Question number 2, am I eating at the right time? I would argue that, and this is based on a lot of research, timing is one of the least important parts of your nutrition. And I know that might go against all the intermittent fasting people. The timing of your food is not that important. It is important when we're looking at things like your circadian rhythm. So yes, you'll sleep better if you don't eat probably right before bed. But when we're talking about health and weight loss specifically, the timing is not that important. What I would say is what I see a lot of is that, again, women are under eating and meal skipping, whether they call that intermittent fasting or just being busy at work and skipping lunch. That can be a big problem because, again, when you are skipping breakfast, your brain doesn't know that you have a fridge full of food that you're just choosing not to eat. It is saying she is not eating because there is not enough food available. Therefore, I must prepare myself and act accordingly for the fact that there's no breakfast coming in. And that is a form of stress on your body. And I know a lot of people will argue, well, it's a good stress. Sure, it can be. But my question would be, are you someone who needs more stress in your life? Because most of the women I work with have a plate load of stress. What most of us do not need is more food stress. Most of us have grown up with food being a major source of stress, both in terms of our restriction and our dieting, but also in terms of the amount of mental energy and anguish that we spend thinking about our food. So if you don't need more stress, which I would argue you probably don't need more, could you actually reduce your overall stress load by committing to just eating regular meals? This is one of the first things I encourage all of my patients to do before we even look at what you're eating and if you're getting enough protein and all of those. You have to eat regular meals. If you want your brain to stop obsessing with food, you need to eat regularly. Your brain needs to see and know that it is getting fed 3 times a day at regular times. If you are randomly skipping lunch, or some days you eat it at 2 p.m., then 4 p.m., your brain doesn't like that. Your brain doesn't know if lunch is coming and when. It's a stress. It's like anticipating. One of the most powerful things you can do is just to eat 3 meals a day. Just eat regular meals and don't worry so much about the timing in the sense of like, I can't eat after 7 or I can't eat. Again, most of those rules are made up. Can we just start by eating 3 meals a day and then we can go from there? Question number 3, what should I eat? I think this is where people get really overwhelmed because when you look online, you're going to get 400 different opinions about what you should eat. And my recommendation to you is to ignore pretty much everybody and to start seeing how you feel when you eat certain things. Because here's the thing. Just as there are, 8 billion people on the earth right now, it means that there should be 8 billion different diets because all of us are unique. We are unique genetically. We're unique in terms of our needs, our preferences, our schedules. So how did we ever think that some diet is going to fit a large swath of people? They're general recommendations. It doesn't make any sense for you personally. So start to pay attention to how you feel when you eat certain things. How do you feel after you eat a bowl of oatmeal? How do you feel when you have a protein smoothie for breakfast? How do you feel at 4 o'clock when you ate cheese and crackers for lunch? Chances are you're probably pretty tired and hangry and reaching for a coffee or eating a whole bunch of snacks while you prep dinner. So again, the sooner you start to notice and pay attention and get feedback from your own body, the sooner you can figure out what the best, and I'm using huge air quotes that you can't see, but the best way of eating probably doesn't have a name. It's probably not on a plan that someone made. You'll only be able to figure that out when you start listening to your own body and paying attention to how it responds when you eat different things. Some of the things I wish we would pay more attention to as well is focusing on diversity versus restriction. If your nutrition plan is defined by what is not included, by what you don't eat, I would encourage you to flip that and focus on how you can have more variety and more diversity. Because one of the weirdest things that has happened with our nutrition is that we have defined health by what we don't eat, right? We think people are healthy if they don't eat sugar or gluten or coffee or lectins or whatever the heck is like the villain of the day. Again, what we know from the studies of people who actually live the longest, healthiest lives is they don't follow any of these stupid made-up food rules. They eat a variety of different foods from all food groups. They eat fruits and vegetables because, spoiler alert, there are no bad fruits and vegetables, even though they have oxalates and phytic acid and lectins. And those are not causing a problem. We know that people who eat more fruits and vegetables do better. End of story. All these little ingredients that people are so concerned about, those are not causing an issue. Please do not be afraid of fruits and vegetables. There are no bad fruits and vegetables. Some have more sugar, some have more fiber, some have more vitamin C. If you just eat a whole variety, you're going to get the benefits of all the different fruits and vegetables. So how can you make sure that you're bringing more diversity back into your diet? This could look as simple as next time you go to the grocery store, you pick up a new fruit or vegetable that you don't normally have, right? Maybe it's something that's in season, maybe it's something that you've never tried, but literally, how can we bring more into the diet, not less? And the other thing is, can we bring satisfaction and pleasure back into the eating equation? I just did a podcast interview with Gemma Bonham Carter, who's living in France. And when I asked her about what some of the things are that she loves about her experience there and that she wants to bring back, so many of her answers revolved around food, right? When you go to France and you see a French person eating a croissant, they are probably not sitting there thinking about how much fat is in there or what it's going to do to their glucose spikes. They're probably sitting, savoring, and enjoying their croissant for what it is, which is a delicious, yummy baked good. They're enjoying it, and then they're moving on with their life. They're not spending the rest of their day stressed out about having eaten a croissant. There's this Michael Pollan quote that I often come back to, which is they showed a group of Europeans and a group of Americans an image of a chocolate cake. And they asked them, like, what do you think of or what do you see when I show you this picture of chocolate cake? The Europeans answered celebration. The Americans answered guilt. That perfectly shows us how messed up our relationship is to food. Eating a piece of chocolate cake is not going to make or break anything with regard to your health, your weight, your outcomes. Again, we need to stop hyper-focusing on specific foods and we need to zoom out and look at the big picture. You can absolutely have chocolate cake in your life and be healthy. It's not an either or. When we bring pleasure and satisfaction back into the equation is where we really start to get the outcomes we want. Whether it is managing a healthy weight, whether it is helping to support a thyroid condition, whether it is to have more energy and be strong and independent into your 80s, we need to take a longer lens on what we're doing. We need to worry less about what we can sustain for 6 weeks, and we need to look at what can we maintain and enjoy for the next 6 years. Because the decisions we make over and over again are what really add up. It's not the piece of chocolate cake. It's not the bowl of oatmeal. It's not your morning cup of coffee. It's the sum of all those decisions you make over and over and over long stretches of time that are really going to impact the outcomes that you have. Now, I know some of you are listening to this and maybe thinking, well, I have a thyroid condition or I have PCOS. So what about me? Do I need to follow these special food rules? One of my favorite things that I get to do in my patient appointments is to tell people with thyroid conditions to ignore all of the thyroid diets on the internet and bring food back into their lives. This just happened this week with a patient who had a thyroid condition and who had cut out coffee. And I was like, you do not need to cut out coffee. Coffee has not caused the problem, and cutting out coffee is not going to make the problem better. So you should have seen the smile on her face when I told her she could drink coffee. Coffee is another one. Could have done this whole episode on coffee. Coffee is not a problem. Coffee is actually one of the top sources of antioxidants in most North American diets. It is not causing your cortisol problems. Your life is causing your cortisol problems. It is not messing up your hormone balance. Your life is messing up your hormone balance. Again, we need to stop vilifying specific foods as if one food has the ability to derail our health. That's just not how it works. So if you need to be told, coffee does not need to be avoided unless you hate it or it gives you massive anxiety. You can please enjoy your coffee in the morning. Because what's actually way more harmful than a cup of coffee or a bowl of oatmeal is the constant restriction and yo-yoing on and off your nutrition plan. We know that this is not good for us mentally. It's not good for us physically. We know that dieting is a risk factor for weight gain, meaning the more you diet, the more you're likely to gain weight. We have chosen an activity, dieting, to help us lose weight. And what it's actually doing for the vast majority of people is it's actually contributing to weight gain. Because every time we lose and then we fall off the plan, we gain all that weight back. And because you just freaked your brain out because you didn't eat enough, it's like, I'm going to carry on a couple extra pounds just in case. And when you do this over and over and over, those pounds really add up. So we're actually causing weight gain when we engage in dieting a lot of the time. And as I said so many times in episode 1, it kills me that so many women are spending so much of our precious time and energy obsessing about our food, our nutrition, and our bodies. It really doesn't have to take up that much time, and brain space, right? Your diet doesn't actually have to have rules, and it doesn't have to have a name. And I know how scary it can feel to let go of food rules that you feel are helping you to stay on track, but they're not. They're actually causing and contributing so much of those feelings of cravings and loss of control that you feel. Those are the direct result of our attempt to control and restrict our food. That is what's keeping us stuck in this diet pendulum of restriction, binging, restriction, binging. And that shit is exhausting. I gave up all my food rules a few years ago. My weight is stable. I don't spend that much time thinking about food. I eat what I want when I want it. I don't feel guilty about it. And you better believe that I will eat a big bowl of oatmeal whenever I damn please. Thanks for listening, and I will see you back here in a couple weeks. Thanks for spending your precious time with me today. Remember, it takes a village or a podcast community to really make a dent in this fatigue epidemic. If today's episode resonated with you, do me a favor. Share it with a friend or two, and if you have a second, drop us that shiny 5-star review. It means so much to me. Are you eager to solve your own personal energy puzzle? Hop on over to fatiguefixer.ca/quiz and check out my fatigue fingerprint quiz. Let's pinpoint what's standing between you and feeling your best. A big thank you to Jen Hudson and Drew Gardner over at Story Studio Network for bringing these conversations to life. And hey, just so you know, I've got your back. Your fatigue, it's super real, and it's definitely not just all in your mind. I see you and I believe you. Every 2 weeks, we'll keep these heart-to-hearts going, learning together and cheering each other on. Because between you and me, accepting perpetual exhaustion as the norm, that's not going to fly around here. See you back here in 2 weeks. Bye!